Welcome to another episode of the Anthony Sarandrea Podcast, filled with exclusive interviews with experts from all fields, motivation, inspiration, personal development, business, and more. This is the Anthony Sarandrea Podcast.
Thanks again for hopping on. I appreciate it. We good to go, Alex?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Tim Crown, Insight Enterprises, $7 billion a year in revenue, 7,000 employees, Fortune 500 company, founder and chairman. Your stock's tripled over the last year. And I mean, you just got to be overwhelmingly happy with the success you've had in your career. I mean, was it 35 years I saw you started Insight?
34 years.
34 years ago.
Long time.
Jesus, man.
Somebody's old in this room. You know?
Yeah, it's not you. You wouldn't know it from looking at you. You know what? Before I get into anything, I'm going to start with a story. You and I came in, and not that I think I have an ego, but I was pumped. I've never done a 25-mile bike ride. I came in. First time I met you, I was like, yeah, I just got off a 25-mile bike ride. Dude, I found out you biked across America in my research. Tell me more about that. You did. What is it called? It's literally, what is it called? Race across America. You literally went 7 days, and you didn't even mention a word. You didn't even say I'm a cyclist, too. You fucker. How was that race?
Well, so a little bit is I think as kids we all get certain habits and things we like.
Yes.
I like to ride bikes.
Yeah.
So I can show you my garage in my house. I have 2 stalls dedicated to bikes. So I have 28 bikes between me and the missus and the kids.
And we're talking bicycles.
Bicycles.
Yeah, we're not
Bicycles.
talking motorcycle bikes. Yes.
But also from mountain bikes, electric, non-electric, analog if you want to call it that. Adventure bikes, which is what I love to do, put the gear on the bikes and go. And then road bikes, kind of a hybrid. I also ride unicycles. So I like bicycles.
You picked that up when you were a kid?
Yeah. So it's just kind of funny how you get used to that stuff. Yeah, I've done Race Across America 3 times.
3 times you've gone.
So it's one of these things where we didn't go to win. We just went to have a good time and testing yourself with physical activity or whatever it is you're doing.
Yes.
It's pushing yourself and saying, hey, am I capable of doing that?
Yeah.
100%. And in my opinion, everybody's capable of almost anything with enough practice, dedication, persistence, and time, right? So for like that, these kind of events, you got to train 6 months to a year.
I believe it.
You just don't show up and say, hey,
let me go running
which way?
Across America. Well, and you brought your kids with you too.
One of them we did, yes. I brought my 2 older kids.
So they followed suit.
I'm trying to get everybody to work out, but also to try themselves, to push them as far as they can. One of my theories is if you haven't pushed yourself to failure, you don't know what you're really capable of.
Yeah.
How could you? Whether it's athletics, academics, business, relationships, life. If you're not living on the edge, at least a little bit, and saying, hey, I'm out of control and I did fail,
yes, then
how could you possibly know what you're capable of?
So let's talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind, because I think today with Instagram, TikTok, everybody gets to see the best version of someone, right? Mm-hmm. Like I get to see my car, my house. Meanwhile, you didn't see the 10 years I worked my ass off, or maybe someone rented something. So that, I share that same mantra. So my favorite thing, everyone goes, give me one little quote. I go, fail fast. That's my favorite saying on the planet. I have it all over my house. Fail fast, fail fast. You said, accept and be excited by failure. That's like one of, if not your main mantra you live by. What did that develop as a kid? How can somebody, I guess even more applicable, let me tailor this down. How can somebody who's so used to being flooded with the best version of someone where they don't see failure, that all they see is success all day long on the social media platforms of the world, how can they adopt that mindset today?
So many things occurred to me later in life that I look back on, and at the time, it's a little bit like, how did I not know that? Sure. Okay. So when I was around 30, I joined an organization called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And through that, they have a subset inside of a chapter, which is a forum. So you get 6, 8, 10 guys and gals in a room, and you basically, over a period of months, you get a level of trust, and you basically bare your soul.
Sure.
And what you figure out is every single person has demons. Mm-hmm. I don't care how successful they are, and I have a corollary I'll tell you in a second here, but no matter who it is, they've got issues. They've got Uncle Pete. Hey, do not let your kids alone with Uncle Pete for even a minute, okay?
100%.
I'm making it up, right?
Yeah.
Or, hey, I'm successful, but I'm really unsure. Was it luck? Was it me? Was it somebody else? Or whatever going on. Not a single person's life is perfect.
Yeah.
And my corollary is the more perfect a person's life looks like, I 100%
Fucked up there.
tell you they got something going on.
For sure.
I mean, they're either a kink meister or they got, this crazy gambling habit or they're a drug user or whatever, right?
Yes.
So, but that YPO experience taught me to let's call it bare my soul, so to speak. And also not just to bear it to other people, to bear it to myself.
Yes.
It's okay that everything's not perfect.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the failure type thing. If it's perfect, that means you're not pushing it. 100%. You're not living on the edge. You're not going and saying, okay, I've got this in whatever it is, whether it's, let's call it your physical ability from athleticism and biking. Well, can I get a little bit better? Mm-hmm. You can't be perfect, right?
Yes.
So you got to keep pushing it. What I found is so I'm in my late 50s, is at age 50, people start to relax. And some people, actually, I've seen people make a lot of money early, and they basically
let the gas off.
They let the gas off,
yes.
And they don't push themselves anymore, and they coast. That's wonderful and fine, but I don't think you're giving yourself the fullest possible life if you do that. And again, whether it's any part of your life, it's if you talk about an intense entrepreneur. I'll tell you, they're an intense relationship person. They're an intense athlete. And oh, by the way, if you're not working out, you're missing that last 10 or 20% of what you can give the world and your relationships if you're not able to push yourself to go do that.
For sure. It's in all categories, right? And it's like...
Exactly. It's a mindset.
And I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan, and he said, growth equals happiness. And I think, I always tell the story when I wanted to make $100,000, and then when I did it, depressed is a extreme word, but I got really low. I got sad. I was like, I made it. Now what the fuck do I do with my life? I was like, what's up? And then I keep experiencing that at levels and levels, and it's that mindset. No wonder why you can grow a $7 billion company. Why don't you stop at 10 million? Why don't you stop at 100 million? Why don't you stop at $1 billion? Because that's what keeps you happy. So your argument, and I would agree with, is somebody whose equation means the growing every day or pushing yourself means you're going to be happier is far superior than someone who says, when I have $5 million in the bank account, I'm going to be a happy person. Yeah.
I think all this stuff comes to the realization that whatever it is, if it's a financial goal, a relationship goal, or whatever it is, as humans, we're really good at adapting to new situations. So let's say you were making $30,000 a year and suddenly you're making $100,000. That's more than you could possibly dream of 3 years ago.
Yes.
But 6 months in, or even 2 months into making $100,000, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't really change anything.
Sure.
And when I say that, what has to reset is your mindset. How are you going to grow personally, professionally? I always call it the big four: personal, professional, family, community.
Yes.
To be world class, I think you only focus on one at a time. It doesn't mean you can't do the other ones, but you can't say, I'm going to go be world class at two things at the same time. The example I always give is Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball athletes, went to try to do baseball and even dedicate his life and still couldn't do it.
Sure.
Why is it that we've only had a handful of people, 3 or 4 that I can remember, that have been able to play 2 professional sports?
Yes.
In history? Wow.
Yeah.
What it tells you is to be at that tip of the spear of that world class, you have to focus and dedicate. And what is that for you? But to that point, when you think about it, you got to keep pushing. Every new world record was impossible last year.
Yeah.
And the year before.
Sure. Okay.
So when you start thinking about this, it's a mindset. It's a mindset to say, whatever I did today, it's wonderful and great, but tomorrow's I have to get better.
Yeah.
And I have to get either a little bit better or a big incremental better, as an example.
So where does someone, I guess let's just take someone younger who's thinking about getting into entrepreneurship, or maybe their business doing a few $100,000 in revenue. When in someone's life do you decide to put the priority on, let's say, family or community or business? At what point, if you're saying you have to go 100 degrees into one, which I completely agree with, or 100% into it, what stages of life have you found, I guess let's just ask from personal experience, we'll take the YPO, the Gestalt, when in your life have you seen those transitions switch where you focus more on community or focus more on this, focus more on that?
So, and I'll relate it back to a speech I gave at Insight via Zoom or Teams, whatever it was, maybe a month ago, to the Global Marketing Organization. And for whatever reason, marketing has a significant number of females in that profession, especially in the digital world.
Yes.
And what was interesting is a lot of the questions that I was asked was really around balance. And I gave again what I think is very transparent. I don't believe in balance. If you want to be world class, you have to pick that one thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, you can be slightly less than world class and balance it. Another example I always give is Eric Heiden in speed skating. Here's a guy that trained 8 to 10 hours a day. Speed skating. Okay. At a time when people didn't do that 40 years ago. Oh, by the way, he did race across America too. Just a funny side note.
No shot.
But again, he's a driven guy. But who's willing to sacrifice everything else? For me, my 20s was Insight.
Yeah.
I stopped working.
You worked every day, you said.
A half-day Christmas when my daughter was born.
Yeah.
Because I felt guilty. And my position is not only am I hopefully going to outthink, I'm going to outwork all my competitors.
Yeah.
I got one thing I'm going to do every single day, every waking moment. I do one thing.
Yeah.
That's this business. And I'm not saying it's the right answer.
Right.
But if you want to compete, especially with lack of capital or other things, lack of experience,
You have to make it up somewhere.
and that's also why I think in the 20s so many entrepreneurs are born, is because they don't have those other commitments.
Yeah.
And by not having those other commitments, that frees up time and allows them to really focus.
So solid. One thing to semi-segue from this is, so I like to think I go hard. I work same thing, 16 hours a day. I love what I do. I couldn't imagine doing anything other than what I do. But I find myself scatterbrained sometimes, thinking about, even talking, I'm thinking about this, I'm looking at this. Is what I found was one of the main takeaways, I got a bunch from the first time we met and every time we meet actually, was you sat there with a pen and paper and you were present with everything. And I am a blip compared to any successes you've ever had in your life. I mean, I guess personally, I'm wondering how the hell do I work on that? Your presence with a million things on your plate that you can be doing was just that was my biggest takeaway. I was like,
Interesting.
This guy is so present right now talking to me. It's insane. I don't have anything more than maybe just a comment out of that, but that was a huge takeaway for me. It was just your overall how present you were able to be with so much stuff going on in your life.
No, I appreciate that because it's something I actually have to work at. I have extreme ADD, ADHD, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I literally self-medicate with caffeine. So I drink 4 significant, large coffee iced teas per day. Okay. And I stream them out during the day.
That's not counterintuitive to you being a million miles an hour?
If you have that condition, it actually calms you and focuses you.
Really?
Same thing as Adderall or anything else. I don't like to take other stuff because it makes me feel weird.
Yes.
But to your point, being in that moment it's all those things you know but you don't want to do. It's meditation. It's self-reflection. It's those self-help guides. Hey, stop thinking about the past.
Yes.
Which I think is probably the single greatest thing entrepreneur can learn. Is to not dwell on the past.
Yeah.
Learn from the past and don't get too far ahead. We've all got this vision of what we think the business is going to become. In my experience of doing over 100 startups, it's never, not once, turned out what I thought it would.
Yeah.
So years later, I call it the pot of gold scenario or whatever. I see a pot of gold way off in the distance, and all of a sudden I'm walking, and hey, there's one right here. Why don't we just stop right here and pick this one up?
Yeah.
Okay, stop going over there. Or there's this enormous brick wall that I was too far away to see. So my thing is being in that moment and what I would call self-reflecting, but also reanalyzing. Every time I'm in a startup, every month I literally step back and I spend an hour or two either with the team or just myself and say, let's assume every single thing that I assumed was wrong. Or what's the new input? What's the new data? Why are we going this direction? Just reconfirm it, because almost assuredly you're controlling what you control, but you don't know what your competitors are doing. But also the market is moving so fast.
Yeah.
Did something happen, good or bad, that you need to change? Think about the virus.
Sure.
Who forecasted that? No one.
Right.
And a lot of people were able to take advantage of it because they were well positioned, and some was just right place, right time.
Sure. 100%. And I think, do you follow Kobe Bryant? close to or study his work at all?
I've some of it. I mean, I read the book of his coach and everything else. And,
two principles you said there. He said, and don't quote me on this, basketball and then my family. So again, getting back to that world class. And then I think it was, what was it? What's the UConn's women's team? They win every year in basketball just about. And they lost. And their star player, Kobe Bryant, was mentoring. And he goes, did you watch the tape of the game you lost? She goes, I don't want to watch that. I'm moving forward. He goes, well, how are you going to know what to change if you don't go back and study it? So it's funny that the principles you're saying, like I'm a huge basketball fan. I know you're a sports and athlete.
I went to Kansas, so
I know you did.
We follow basketball.
Jayhawks, how do you think they're going to do this year? They're tournament kicks off tonight.
They're number 3 seed in the West, so we'll see. We'll see. I'm always optimistic, but this is kind of a down year for them.
Yes,
but a perennial powerhouse. I always say it like this: if you're a recruit, okay, how do you get somebody to go to Lawrence, Kansas, middle of flipping nowhere, where it's cold and windy? That's hard.
Yes.
But it's, again, that idea that, hey, you got to come here. We're going to make you better. We're going to increase your chances for, I think, most of the prospects to get into the NBA.
Yeah.
We're going to give you a higher chance. Why does Duke always have such great teams? The same thing.
Yes.
I believe it's around that one individual, the coach, right?
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
And then the program that he's built over 35 years or whatever it is.
100%. And actually getting the right people there, too, for the right reasons, to your point. So I guess when you're hiring or when you're investing in a company, let's even go with investing. I've heard you say, you invest in people, not in businesses. And what I heard from what the segment you just shared was exactly that. The idea that I have today, let's just take me, is you're telling me, and you're right, is not going to be anywhere it's going to be in 5 years. It's going to be completely different. But the person's ability to navigate and change. I mean, can you touch on that more, on how somebody can refine those skills today to be someone like yourself, or just in general, is investable or hireable?
Let me back into that. So let's use insight. So insight as an example, the way that I look at it, we're in our 6th turning, if you want to call it, or 6th change of the business model.
Got it.
And every 3 to 5, 6 years, we start morphing, kind of, let's call it either ramping down the previous model or stabilizing it and then ramping up where the market's going.
Okay.
If you think about the cloud, in 2010, 2011, I don't believe we've ever bet the company on one thing.
Yes.
But we shifted all focus to that. And I like that because in my mind it was inevitable that it would eventually go to the cloud. What I didn't know was timing. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it was really 2015 when it really started to shift. Although I'll tell you, we had forecasted much more of a cloud-based world, either private or public, than has happened. There's still a whole lot of folks with on-prem. That was something we missed.
Yeah.
But today we have a huge $1 billion on-prem business in infrastructure, data centers, on site.
Yeah.
Where we had, 10 years ago or 11 years ago, we would have forecasted that to go to close to zero. It didn't. Awesome. So we kept that and basically waited with the market while the cloud business is just absolutely exploded, as an example. But if you look at Insight,
and for people that don't know tech as well, on-prem, correct me if I'm wrong here, is actual physical hardware rooms in your actual...
And you own it.
And you own it.
If we had a server room around the corner. Okay?
And the cloud is Google Drive, Dropbox, one of these.
Azure.
Got it. So it's moving VCR to DVD. So my dad said nobody will ever buy the DVDs. As far as the transition, as far as throwing
and you're going to put those DVDs in the cloud.
Yes. Yes.
On the Amazon AWS server or whatever it is.
100%. Sorry.
No.
Yes.
But if you went back to the beginning of Insight, our first year, you talk about focus, we sold one product, a 20 megabyte hard drive.
Yeah.
And all we offered was price, availability, and customer service. And we got really good at that one thing. If you would have said, hey, let's roll that clock forward 30 plus years, you're going to have 5,000 customer-facing technical people. Okay, you're going to 70% of your gross profit dollars is going to be services, cloud, and hardware is only 30% of the GP. People would have said, "What are you talking about?"
Yes,
and then forget about the scale, right?
Sure,
but that took 30 years. Yeah. That is a long time. The cloud transformation took 10 years. It wasn't overnight. It's like all technology changes. Usually we all overestimate how fast at first and then underestimate what's going to happen in the end, right? Yeah. But go back to this. Insight's a big ship, and trying to move it is you also have change management, you have leadership. How do you keep people on the old revenue streams when they want to go on the new revenue streams? Everybody wants the shiny object, but that's great leadership, right? Yeah. And that's having a vision, having the values, and everybody understanding, hey, we're all in this together, as an example. But go back to a little bit what you're saying with an entrepreneur, especially in a startup. To me, it's around, I like the fail fast, I like product to market fit, customer fit, however you want to frame it.
Sure.
What's working right now or the next step? I know we all want to talk about the grand vision. We're going to be the next Netflix to whatever. But let's talk about what are we going to do this week, next week. Or I'm going to borrow a guy's phrase from a marketing company, Double Nines. What's the next best action? I always call it the next action. Yeah. I like his phrase, next best action.
Yes.
And instead of getting all caught up in all this operating plans and everything else, hey,
what do we need to do?
What are we doing right now?
Yeah, that's so missed and so huge. So the advice, if I'm hearing correctly, is for someone to be more investable. Let's go back to the question, or more hireable, is to focus on the zoom out, zoom in is important. Is that right? The zoom out of here's where I want to go and be. The zoom in is what the hell do I need to do in the next 5 minutes, kind of thing. How do I take action now?
Right. I do think you need to think about, if you want to call it the TAM or total addressable market.
Sure.
What problem are you solving?
Yeah.
Right. And I always look at it like this, which is business comes down to a couple of things: raising revenue and cutting cost. Yeah. Okay. I know it sounds too simplistic.
No, it is.
That's really the business. Yes. And then I always add the third one. Can you scale that?
Yes.
Okay.
For sure.
And is it repeatable? All those other things that we all love to hear in the tech world. But to that point, how do you get around? Hey, what value of those raise revenue, cut costs? What value am I creating for my client? And then how am I going to? What's my capture mechanism?
Of course.
And to that end, if you can do, and I'm not saying this is a rule of thumb. Hey, can you 10x something?
Yeah.
I'll make it up. If you invest $1,000 in my product or service, I'm going to give you 10x the return, either cost reduction or revenue increase. I've always found that is a no-brainer in terms of the sales process.
Of course.
If you go to somebody and say, hey, you're going to get a 30% return on that over 6 years, they're going to start going, okay, now what?
Yep.
And what is the risk, return, what are the inflection points, milestones? But when you talk about it, 10x, the whole numbers change, and they sit on the other edge of their seat and say, wow, okay, that's interesting. Tell me more as an example.
Yes.
To that end. It's just a rule of thumb that I always use in terms of thinking about things.
I love it. Totally makes sense. And I guess going back to, you mentioned one thing I picked out there, was you mentioned this, moving this big ship. So one, I was hoping you could talk on the start of the company, the $2,000 credit card advance that I think you and your brother did too. That's also an interesting topic to dive into, partnering with your brother and family. But the advance, how scary was that at the time? If you're just getting off, now you've got an idea and you're just afraid to take the leap of faith to start starting your company. Like, can you talk us through? Because it's so easy now, right? Like $7 billion in revenue, 7,000 employees, Fortune 500. You're like, yeah, it's easy for him to say that. But talk to me about like day one when you had zero and you took a $2,000 credit card advance, which is a freaking phenomenal story I never knew.
Well, so to that point, I would say the first 2 or 3 years, I call it being in the wilderness. Mm-hmm. And every startup is based upon where it's at. Actually, I'll take that. I'll turn that off. It can be very distracting.
See, he's working on me already. That's my guess.
Well, it can be.
Yeah.
It takes away from the focus.
Yes, that's right.
So one of the things on that is that every business, I use the analogy of being in the wilderness, which is you're trying to find your way. You're trying to figure out what the business model is. Who is the right customer? Who's the wrong customer? Who can't you service, as an example? So as an example with that one, let's use the customer example. What we figured out was we couldn't sell to corporates or universities because we couldn't wait net 30. We didn't have any money.
Got it.
We had to do credit card. Why? Because the next morning, that money magically showed up in our account.
Yes.
One of the things with that is we took a very small advertisement for, I think, $250 or $300, our initial ad, and tested it and said, hey, the price of hard drives is going down. If it goes down, since it's a lead time of 90 days, if it goes down $50, everybody's pricing 3 to 6 months behind because they're all focused on everything. We'll focus on the one product.
Yeah.
We'll forecast. We think it's going to be, let's say, $250 cost. Right now it's $350. Let's go $299.
Got it.
And see if we sell any of these things. If we sell 100, we're going to pay for our ad and have enough money to cover the phone bill and everything else. And by God, we sold 160 the first month.
Incredible.
And then we went off to the races, although we were in the wilderness for years because we didn't know exactly what we're trying to do. We didn't have any capital. We didn't have an ERP system. We were both computer science guys, so we could code. But that was back when there weren't a lot of systems out there.
Of course.
To that end, we did not take any outside capital until we went public in '95 when I was 30 years old. And the thing about it is it wasn't that we didn't want it. Nobody offered it.
Yeah.
Okay. We couldn't even get a bank line. Okay. Wow. At that point. So we had driven the business up to $250 million on $3 million of equity.
Wow.
Oh, by the way, we left every dollar in the business.
Yeah.
Even though we were making good money, we left 100% of the dollars in the business.
Great lesson in itself.
And that allowed us to have the capital to keep going. But we made so many mistakes, but to your first point, small mistakes. And we were iterating. It's a little bit like organizational theory. It's a class I should have paid attention in college, but I didn't even go to. I just took the test, right?
Yes.
So we would just read books on the nights and weekends. If there was a subject we didn't understand, just go get 5 books.
Okay, so on that point, you're technical, right? Is that fair to say?
I was more technical at the time. Now I'm more of a general business guy.
So how'd you make that transition? Because I think I've told you I teach at Arizona State University, and I'll get a lot of times an engineer, and they're just rock stars at whatever they can do and build and make. But they go, I don't like talking to people. I'm scared to talk to people. You have a phenomenal gift of gab. You can talk and you can inspire and you can paint the vision and sell the vision correctly and follow through on it. How'd you learn that? Was it through reading books?
I think some of it is. The other one is practice.
Yeah.
So I've been to 3 speech coaches.
Yeah.
Okay. I've videotaped myself many times, looked at myself.
Yes.
And I've also understood that some of my own quirks are good.
Yeah.
You don't have to be perfect. You can also be human. And I also think that it's like when I speak at Inside of the other businesses or like this, people know that they're going to get what I really think.
Yeah.
And sometimes it may not be what they think. They may think it's wrong, or it may not be pretty, but it's what I think.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And so it didn't happen by accident, is essentially what you're saying. It didn't show up overnight that you were a good talker. You freaking recorded, practiced, learned, hired coaches. You ran at it. Just like any skill. You learned it.
Correct. And I'm gonna quote Bobby Knight, the old Indiana basketball coach.
Yes, of course.
It's not practice. It's practicing perfection and increasing. Just because you practice, I give the joke in college. I used to love to play basketball at the fraternity house.
Yeah.
I played 2 to 3 hours a day, probably 6-7 months a year. I never got any better.
Yeah.
I had fun, but I wasn't practicing to get better. I wasn't being coached.
Yes.
I wasn't looking at my pick and roll and saying, "Hey, I should take that left foot out further," or whatever it is.
Sure.
But that was a choice I made. In whether it's speaking or any part of business, are you really practicing to get better?
Yeah.
Are you disciplined? Why did the Roman army dominate the world 2,000 years ago? Because they started having professional soldiers. Their full-time job was soldiering, not just on the weekends or when there was a war, but then they also trained, practiced, and had the discipline, right?
Yeah.
And they tried to get better. So if you think about it, why is a Navy SEAL that much better, let's say, than a boot camp graduate Army recruit? It's because they've had a year or 2 more training, focused, dedicated, etc. Now, that same Army recruit, if they had the same training, they would come up radically also.
Yeah.
There's some natural ability there of why they were chosen physically, probably, and their mental acuity. But, hey, training and practicing and having people that are better than you mentor and coach you, it's going to make you better.
Well, getting coached correctly, to your point, right? Like if my dad's telling me what to do with my finances and my dad's not financially savvy, who am I listening to? Am I listening to someone like yourself or something like that? So it's being coached by A-tier, A-level people or as close to that top caliber as you can get. That's fair to say?
I like that. I would also call it is I'm going to call it, I don't want to bring politics in, but so let's make up an issue like minimum wage.
Sure.
the more you understand about economics, that even a person that maybe not know a lot, in your mind be an expert in economics, they may have a valuable tidbit or a piece of information. If you've got a good framework of knowledge in that subject, you can listen to that and sift and filter and grab that nugget and say, wow, I hadn't thought about that. Or that's an interesting perspective. And it doesn't mean they're going to influence your entire framework, but you've already got a subject matter expertise
You have to
on
build
that.
the framework.
And so now you can listen to everybody, and you can also immediately sift out and say, okay, that person has no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great, Johnny.
Yes.
And you can move on to the next thing, right?
Because you have that framework. And that framework was built through coaching.
Coaching, knowledge, research, study. So I always call it like this. The education begets knowledge, knowledge begets skills, skills beget experience. And then if you wrap all those things together for a long time, if you want to use Gladwell's and the old research, 10,000 hours or whatever it is, then you truly become an expert at something.
Yes.
One of the things, though, that I think is important in all this, and especially as you start to scale your business, is this idea of expertise. Knowledge is doubling every 5 to 7 years. You can't be an expert at everything. It's not possible.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, you may know less than 1% about the world right now. And it's going down every year, not up, no matter how hard you try.
For sure.
So knowing what you know, but also knowing what you don't know, or what I always say, what you think you know, okay, to this point, that's when judgment and perspective. A good example is let's say that I'll use myself. I have a huge void in medical biology and chemistry. And in my mind, it's a conscious decision.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go spend my time learning those disciplines. Okay. And those are two totally different disciplines that overlap. I'm going to spend my time on technology, business, other things.
Right.
Okay. So I can't go out and say I'm going to be an inch deep and a mile wide in everything.
Yeah. What is it? Master of jack of all, master of none.
Correct. Correct. Although I do think in business or technology, especially with innovation happening, having a broad understanding is good. But that said, the example I always give, let's say you're CEO of a business. I don't care who it is, no CEO is an expert at everything. You've got weaknesses. And the more strengths you have in certain areas, that means the flip side is you're super weak at something else.
Yeah.
And when you're the CEO of a reasonable size org, you want to have at least let's use financial acumen, at least a reasonable financial acumen. But you don't want to go spend the next 4 years becoming an expert. Hire somebody.
Yeah.
Hire to your weakness. That's why I always say it for CEOs or even division leaders. Hire somebody that's going to support you, buffer you, and then you've got to figure out based upon your knowledge and their knowledge, hey, when do I just trust them, or when do I trust but verify, or when do I take it under advisement?
So if you could dive a little bit deeper into that, because I think a lot of people listening might be a solopreneur or they might have a small team, and it's that, I don't know if it's the control or getting burnt or issues. And I joke, like every first new role I hire, I always get screwed over. And I go, okay, bad hire. Next one almost always, or the third one is always great. But how do you not get jaded along the way for the trust plus verify? Like, to me, it sounds like that is one of, if not the most important skills, because you mentioned, like, I can't be a master at stocks. I can't watch the stock market all day. I'm working on my business. Right. But to know enough to where I can find someone who knows more than me that can actually do that. So that seems like, to me, at least in my personal experience, that's one of the best skills, is to be able to spot and talent or attract the right people in your life, things like that.
I think it is, and it's also figuring out how they fit.
Yeah.
Okay? Fit into your business, into your life, or whatever. It's like, I'll give you a side note on partnerships. Yeah. Why do partnerships always fail over a long period? In my opinion, they fail 100% of the time. Okay? I've always narrowed it down to three things. It's the people are starting at a different position in life. Got it. So as an example, one person is significantly wealthier than the other person. This person says, hey, let's roll 100% of profits in for the next and the other one can't. Wait a second, I can't do that, right? The other one is what's the vision of the company? And visions in the short run may be very, very similar, but like any two lines that are slightly off, the farther out you go, the more they diverge. Makes total sense. And then the other one is time frames. If my father at 83, you're going to tell him, hey, I have a 20-year plan, he's going to go, why are you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay, there's a 97% chance I'm going to be dead.
Yes.
And if you're 22, the 20-year plan makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So the time frame is the other one. So when you think about that, how do you get perspective? So on this advice that you're getting from the person, whether it's this framework or other frameworks, how do you put that into a judgment and perspective that allows you to put it in context?
It's beautiful.
Okay?
Makes a ton of sense.
I'm not saying to me it's a science, but it's also an art.
Yeah.
So a good example, let's use yourself. What percentage of your net worth at your age should you be in the stock market?
I don't know.
Whatever I can give you 8 opinions.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how risky?
Yeah.
How is it domestic? Is it foreign? And you may have a stock picker over here that is absolutely positively the best in the world at it, but your perspective may be, ooh, I have a lot of business risk. I really don't want to put that much capital risk in market because it's going to go like this.
Sure.
Right? I want to put it, invest and forget, and not have to worry about it, and know I'm never going to lose money. I'm making this up
for
your perspective. That would be where your personal opinion is. So where does your personal opinion, perspective, and position come in? This is why I think you're talking about that hire you made may have been a wonderful person for somebody else, but not for you.
Sure. Makes a ton of sense.
So that's the art form, I think,
Situational.
to this stuff.
Yeah,
exactly.
that makes a ton of sense.
Exactly.
It's beautiful. And I find that interesting. You talk about partnerships always failing or have a 100% chance of failing.
Or they grow apart is another way to say it.
So can you touch on you and your brother?
So it's interesting. So we've been partners. As a side note, I didn't realize I was an entrepreneur until this. When I say that, even though I started cutting lawns in 3rd grade,
yes.
I mean, painting houses.
Makes sense in hindsight.
In hindsight,
yes.
right? I didn't have a real job until I got out of college. My first job with a big computer company.
For sure.
I'm like, okay, wow. Because I thought I'd made it, right? Because
Yes.
I was in a suit in an office. But with my brother, he left the business in 2000, Insight.
Okay.
And I stayed on as CEO for another 5 years.
Nice.
And then became chairman. One of the things with that is that we have a big overlap of investments, but we have a lot of stuff we do independently too. Mm-hmm. But I think what's different with your brother, and my father was a military, he's a fighter pilot, so I went to 3 different high schools in multiple countries. So my best friend was my brother, because he's the only guy I would know.
Yes.
We kept moving, every year or two. So I think it's a little bit of a unique relationship, and I think you have that inherent trust.
Got it.
That's a positive. The negative is you're still brothers.
Yeah.
And brothers fight, they argue and everything else.
100%.
But I think in the end, relationships like this ebb and flow. And over time, like in COVID, my brother's been traveling for 20 years, 200 days of the year out of the country.
Change.
Okay.
Yes.
Since he retired from Insight at age, 37 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But today he's back working almost every day. Now he's in Cabo right now.
Yeah.
But because he's got nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
So, that ebb and that flow comes and goes.
Got it.
Which I think is a natural rhythm of life.
Yes. So be open for those ebbs and flows is essentially what it sounds like to me. So it's not necessarily don't start out in a business partnership. It's a bad idea. It's just there's going to be ebbs and flows along the way.
And I should point that out.
Yes.
The reason I say that partnerships always split apart over time is because of 3 things I said.
Yes.
In my opinion, the empirical research is there. You double your chances of success with a partner.
Yeah.
Double. And if you add a third one, it increases another 20% chance of success.
Incredible.
Now, so why? Because you have better perspectives. Different. You can bounce ideas off you. It's like brainstorming
That difference
sessions.
is good.
Yes.
In the beginning. Yes.
Brainstorming sessions. Having 2 in a brainstorm is not a brainstorm. You need 3. You need 2 people talking, person listening. 4 or 5, probably even better if it's the right mix, as an example.
Yes.
But go back to the partnership side. If you know all partnerships are going to break apart, just plan for it.
Yeah.
Hey, what happens if?
I don't like you anymore. I don't have your vision. Yeah.
Or hey, you know what? It could be a double shotgun type of an exit. It could be a third party. It could be first right of refusal. I'll offer. You could buy or sell. There's 50 different versions of these things. Or it could be, hey, every year we're going to sit down and we're going to ask ourselves
Do we want to be in this
face to face.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? What's fair? What's reasonable? But to pretend like, hey, I'm never going to sell this business, and you pretend, it's the same thing I use on people. I have a relationship, at least I think I do, with hundreds of ex-Insight teammates and executives.
Sure you do.
And when I say that is, I always say to executives that work for me, just like the partnership, we're not going to die together in this business.
Yes.
Okay? So when you decide it's not the right time, come to me.
Yeah.
And the example I always give, or vice versa, I'll do the same, is there was a woman who wanted to basically move to Africa for charity work. And she was basically waiting until she had enough money to go do it. And I learned about this through a friend of her friend, and I came to her and I said, I'll tell you what, instead of surprising me in 12 to 18 months with 2 weeks notice, let's plan for it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Plan your replacement. Hey, and oh, by the way, I want you to live your life's dream, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If this isn't it, I'm okay with that.
It's abundant mindset. Exactly.
And to that end, hey, we're going to have a celebration party when you exit. And oh, by the way, sure as shooting, 5 years later, guess who came back to work?
Yeah. Of course.
Oh, by the way, and the door was wide open.
Yeah.
So my thing is that
transparency,
this idea that we have to be together forever, you have to do all this stuff. It's to be open-minded. And again, you took the words out of my mouth. It's the abundance mindset. Yeah. It's why the theory of constraints, I think, works in economic theory, but not in reality. It's like the world is getting better. The world is getting stronger. The world is getting, if you want to call it, more abundant every day. Yeah. You can always find anecdotal evidence of negativity, and the politicians and the media want to focus on those handful of things.
Gets eyeballs, yeah.
But the reality is by every single metric on the planet, the last 30 years has been awesome.
Yes.
For everybody.
I completely agree.
And it's only going to get better.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, we're getting towards the end here, but one thing just to segue on the abundance mindset, I gotta tell you, when we first became friends and sat down, you said, who's the 15 phone calls I can make to change your business? And I had never actually thought of that, believe it or not. Not that we're doing, incredible, crazy stuff or numbers, but we're on our way. And to think who are the 15 contacts that would change my life? I think everyone should be thinking that from day one. Who are the? You start at the top. Okay, I want to learn golf. Can I get in touch with Tiger Woods? No, you can't. Because caddy? No. Maybe the guy you trained with in high school? Maybe his friend that trained, and work backwards. I just wanted to share that with you. You telling me that really changed my perspective in multiple ways. I think about it every day. What is the A+ scenario here? And then if I work backwards and I end at a B, it's better than saying what's the realistic or what's the C.
Let me give you a different cut on that also.
Please.
I like your perspective on that because I think it totally makes sense. Every great thing on the planet, in my opinion, has never been done by one person. So let's use my favorite example of Steve Jobs. Yep. Did he invent the iPhone? No. Did he code one line of code in the iTunes store? But those were unbelievable things. It takes a group of people. It takes a strong leader with the ability to manage those people and do it. But to your point, no great thing has ever been built by one person. Yes. Ever. And you've got to figure out who those right people are. And a good example might be an organization. I'm going to use Insight. We had an enormous inbound 800 number business where we're getting literally 3 million phone calls a month inbound. And we shifted the model to outbound. Yeah. And we woke up 3 years later and inbound was 5% of the business. I needed different leadership. Yeah, I had to change the people around me. I had to bring in other skill sets. Hopefully, I was able to take a lot of those individuals that were good at inbound, move them to other things, retrain them, repurpose them, or maybe, hey, their job was that, and they went to the next organization. Yes, that they could be a world-class expert in that particular thing. But getting the right people around you, there's no way. Let's use Elon Musk. Do you think he's designing every single rocket booster? No way. No flipping way. Yes. Now he's a smart dude. He's got the organization. He's got balls of steel. He's got all those things that are doing all the right things. But the reality is he's got to get people around him. Every great organization of significance, especially scale, has been built by a lot of people. Yeah. A lot of people. I could talk about Dell and some of the guys that were his mentors that nobody talks about. Yeah. Okay, he built it, but he had a lot of help along the ways to get there. For sure. Even when you think of Steve Jobs, you think of yourself. You're like, you have mentors. I assume you have coaches. Tons. And for most people, including myself, I'm like, this guy is at the top. But you are. But there's always someone who's doing more, coaching a better subject. To your point, that growth. The other one is we all are subject to this. Is the ego and the hubris, and not even if you're still a humble guy. Because you're having so much success, you start believing that I did this. as opposed to we did this, but also that there's a disruptor coming from any angle that you didn't see that can come after you. And that's what great advisors do, is people that you truly trust and have your best interests at heart and you're aligned with, to go over there and say, hey, Anthony, yeah, I know you think your shit doesn't stink, but let me show you the metrics. They're all going the wrong direction.
Sure.
Let me show you these 3 guys over here that are coming up fast.
Coming your way. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, bam, come on, reset.
Incredible.
So I think this kind of stuff, my conclusion and takeaway is if you want to build something of significance and scale, it will not be by yourself.
Yeah, that's incredible. What a great message. Tim, thank you so much for spending the time, brother. I learned a ton, as I always do, doing these, and especially from you every time we get to hang out. It's such a blessing. So I really appreciate you.
Thanks for coming in. Always fun.
If you're still listening to this, that means you learned something valuable on this episode. So make sure you subscribe and leave a review. We'll see you next time on the Anthony Sarandrea Podcast.